Augustine's world was shattered when he turned to the scriptures and found them crude and unpolished. After the elegance of Virgil and Cicero, the Latin Bible seemed like a rough, unrefined text. The patriarchs of the Old Testament, with their adultery, incest, and murder, left him appalled. The story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden seemed childish and naive. When he read the New Testament, the lengthy and contradictory genealogies of Jesus only added to his frustration. He put the book away in disgust, feeling lost and disillusioned. Where could he turn in his quest for religious wisdom? Where could he find scriptures that would satisfy him both intellectually and aesthetically? The answer was both bizarre and unexpected: the Manichaeans. When Augustine returned home to Thagaste after 3 years of studying in Carthage, his mother, Monica, was shocked. Augustine came back with a mistress, an infant son, and a new set of beliefs that were far from what she had hoped for. She accepted his new family with a heavy heart, but the Manichaean heresy was too much for her. She shut him out of her house and mourned him as if he were dead. She was devastated, but a dream vision told her that Augustine would return to the true faith. The local bishop advised her to be patient, saying, "He will grow out of his infatuation with Manichaeism." Mani, a Persian thinker from the 3rd century, had created a unique blend of Christianity, Gnosticism, and mythology. His main concern was the problem of evil. If God is good and omnipotent, how can evil exist? Mani believed that evil is inherent in material things, and that God is not all-powerful. Instead, there are 2 eternal realms: the kingdom of light, ruled by God, and the kingdom of darkness, ruled by Satan. These realms are in constant conflict, and fragments of God's light are scattered in the material world, trapped within human soul. The Manichaeans rejected the Old Testament and much of the New Testament. They believed that Christ was purely divine and never became flesh. His crucifixion was symbolic, not real. They lived ascetic lives, shunning alcohol and meat, and focusing on the spiritual struggle between good and evil. Augustine was drawn to their ideas, especially their explanation of the problem of evil, which resonated with his own inner conflicts. He saw the pure longing of his immortal soul, hemmed in by the evil desires of the flesh. For 9 years, Augustine remained a hearer in the Manichaean sect, subscribing to their basic doctrines and serving the elect, the pure ascetics who renounced sex. He benefited from the influential contacts within the sect and advanced in his career. But he never became one of the elect, as he was not ready to renounce sex completely. Augustine's Manichaeism was a period of intense intellectual and emotional exploration. He found companionship and a sense of belonging within the sect, but he also began to doubt its teachings. The more he read and studied, the more he realized that the Manichaean explanations were unscientific and incoherent. His faith was further shaken when his childhood friend, who had been baptized on his deathbed, embraced Christianity with profound conviction. Augustine was devastated when his friend died. He left Thagaste for Carthage, seeking to escape the painful memories. But the loss of his friend and his growing doubts about Manichaeism left him searching for a new direction. In 383, at the age of 28, Augustine decided to leave Carthage for Rome. He claimed it was to escape the disruptive students and to find a bigger stage for his talents, but it was also to escape his mother's suffocating love. Monica wept and begged to go with him, but Augustine lied to her, telling her the ship would not sail until the next day. He persuaded her to spend the night at a Christian shrine, and during the night he secretly left. In Rome, Augustine taught literature and public speaking, bringing his mistress and son with him. But the strain of leaving his mother left him seriously ill. He recovered, and with the help of Manichaean patrons, secured a position as a professor of rhetoric in Milan, a city of great importance and the home of the emperor. Monica followed her son to Milan, and he found himself under her influence once again. She convinced him to send his mistress away, so that he could make an advantageous marriage. Augustine complied, sending his longtime lover back to Africa, where she vowed to know no other man. He took another mistress to fill the gap until his marriage, which was arranged to an heiress who was too young to marry. Augustine's life in Milan was a mix of ambition, doubt, and spiritual searching. He frequented the cathedral, where the influential Archbishop Ambrose preached. Ambrose's allegorical interpretations of the scriptures opened Augustine's eyes to new possibilities. He began to see the deeper spiritual meanings in the Old Testament and the New Testament, which he had previously found so problematic. But Augustine still struggled with his materialistic view of God. He believed in God but thought of God as a bodily substance, a view that made him susceptible to Manichaean mythology. He needed a new way to understand the divide between the material and the spiritual. It was in the teachings of Plato, particularly the concept of the forms, that Augustine found a new framework. Plato's idea of a non-physical, eternal realm of ideas provided a way to transcend the material world and comprehend the deeper reality. Augustine's journey was far from over, but he was on the path to a new understanding of himself and the world. The road ahead was uncertain, but he was ready to face it with a renewed sense of purpose and a deeper search for truth. Augustine's journey towards finding peace and purpose was a long and complex one. 12 years after being inspired by Cicero's Hortensius, he found himself still struggling with the same questions. He was torn between his desire for truth and wisdom, and his attachment to the pleasures and ambitions of the world. He was intellectually convinced of the truth of Christianity, but emotionally, he was not ready to give up everything he valued. Augustine often debated with himself, making excuses for his delay in fully committing to God. He was afraid of the change that would come with a life dedicated to religion. He was afraid of the void that would be left if he gave up his worldly pursuits. He was especially attached to his relationships and his desire for physical pleasure. He prayed to God, "Give me chastity and continence, but not yet," showing his deep internal conflict. This struggle reached its peak in the summer of 386. Augustine was living in Milan with his mother, Monica, his son, and his close friend, Alypius. One day he retreated to a small garden, seeking a moment of peace to resolve his inner turmoil. He was on the brink of a major decision, but he couldn't push himself over the edge. He was torn between his old habits and his new, growing desire to serve God. In the midst of this intense struggle, Augustine heard a child's voice chanting, "Toll lege," which means take it and read. He took this as a divine sign and rushed to pick up a book of St. Paul's letters. He opened it randomly and read the first passage that caught his eye. The words spoke directly to his heart, not in reveling and drunkenness, not in lust and wantonness, not in quarrels and rivalries. Rather, arm yourselves with the Lord Jesus Christ. Spend no more thought on nature and nature's appetites. These words were like a light that dispelled the darkness in his soul. He felt a sudden clarity and strength, and his will became whole. He was ready to commit to God. Alypius joined Augustine in this new resolve, and together they told Monica, who was overjoyed. She felt that her prayers were finally answered, and her long-held dream was fulfilled. Augustine, Alypius, and Augustine's son, Adeodatus, were baptized by Bishop Ambrose on Easter Saturday, April 24th, 387. After his baptism, Augustine resigned from his teaching position, broke off his engagement, and made plans to return to North Africa to form a monastic community. Before they sailed, Augustine and Monica shared a profound mystical experience. They were leaning out of a window, looking over a garden, and talking about God. In that moment, they felt their souls unite with God, and they experienced a brief but intense vision of eternal wisdom. This shared vision was the last significant event they experienced together. Within 2 weeks, Monica passed away, as if her life's purpose had been fulfilled. After returning to North Africa, Augustine founded a lay monastic community in his hometown of Thagaste. He focused on a life of contemplation and writing, producing a vast body of work that would influence Christian thought for centuries. His son, Adeodatus, died at the age of 17, and Augustine, though he noted his son's brilliance and goodness, did not elaborate on his personal feelings about this loss. In 391, while visiting the city of Hippo, Augustine was ordained as a priest. In 396, he became the co-bishop of Hippo and later the sole bishop, a position he held until his death in 430. Despite the demands of his role, he continued to write and teach, deeply engaged in the challenges of understanding and living his faith. In the final 4 books of the Confessions, Augustine explores the limits and possibilities of human understanding of God. He begins by acknowledging the limitations of language in expressing religious ideas. Words, he explains, are just sounds or marks on paper. It is the mind that gives them meaning. The mind does this by associating words with images stored in memory. These images connect us with the world and allow us to communicate and express our thoughts and desires. Augustine describes memory as a vast, mysterious place within us. It stores images of everything we have experienced, from sights and sounds to feelings and emotions. He marvels at how we can recall these images and use them to understand and communicate. He also considers how we can remember abstract concepts like logic and mathematics, which are not directly tied to physical experiences. Through his reflections on memory, Augustine shows that the journey to understanding God is a deeply personal and ongoing process. It involves not just intellectual knowledge, but also the transformation of the soul. Augustine's Confessions are not just a personal narrative, but a guide for others on their own spiritual journeys. His insights into the human mind and the nature of faith continue to inspire and challenge readers to this day. Augustine understood that our memories are powerful. They help us remember not just the things we see and touch, but also our feelings, thoughts, and ideas. Our minds can wander through all these memories, and that's a big part of what makes us human. But Augustine believed that to truly find God, we need to look beyond our memories. God, according to Augustine, is not something we can picture in our minds. God is not a part of space or time because God created both. When we try to think about God, we can only remember what we've been told or what we've read in the scriptures. But those are just words and images, and they don't capture the real essence of God. God is eternal and unchanging, and our human words and thoughts are always changing and limited. Augustine said that before God created the world, there was no time. Time is something that moves forward with a past, present, and future, but God exists outside of time. For God, everything is happening all at once, in a timeless moment. When we try to understand God, we often get stuck in our own way of thinking, which is bound by time and space. We can't fully grasp God's perspective, which is eternal and beyond our understanding. But even though we can't fully understand God, Augustine believed that God is still present in our lives. Our souls, which are part of God, help us feel God's presence. When we pray or read the scriptures, we can get glimpses of God. These glimpses are like seeing God through a foggy mirror. They are not clear, but they are enough to guide us. Augustine wrote about his own life in a book called the Confessions. In this book, he talks about his past, present, and future, and how they all connect through his memories. He uses his memories to tell a story about his search for God. He shows how his life, with all its ups and downs, is a journey toward understanding God. But he also admits that his book can never fully capture God. Only God can do that. Augustine believed that the scriptures, or the holy books, are a special way that God communicates with us. The words in the scriptures are like a code that God uses to speak to us. They have many layers of meaning, and we can find different truths in them depending on how we read them. Augustine encouraged people to read the scriptures deeply and to look for the deeper meanings that can bring them closer to God. One of Augustine's most famous works, The City of God, was written after the city of Rome was attacked by the Goths. Many people thought that this attack meant that the Christian God was angry with them. But Augustine said that the fall of Rome was not a sign of God's anger. Instead, he said that all human cities like Rome are imperfect and will eventually fail. The real city, the city of God, is a perfect place that exists outside of time and space. It's a place where God's truth and love are fully realized. Augustine believed that we should strive to be part of this city of God, even though we can never fully achieve it in this world. In the end, Augustine's message was about the tension between the imperfect world we live in and the perfect world of God. He believed that we can find glimpses of God's truth in our lives, but we can never fully understand God. The best we can do is to keep searching and to keep growing in our understanding of God. Boethius, once a man of wealth and power, now found himself in a cold, dark prison cell. He was confused and angry, unable to understand why his life had changed so suddenly. He had been a consul, a respected scholar, and an advisor to King Theodoric. But now he was accused of treason and faced a grim fate. In his despair, he wrote sad poems, lamenting his fall from grace and cursing the unjust world that had betrayed him. One day, as Boethius lay on his prison bed, lost in his misery, a mysterious woman appeared before him. She was both young and old, of normal height, but seemed to tower above him. Her eyes glowed with wisdom, and her face demanded respect. Her robe, though ancient and worn, was adorned with symbols of practical and theoretical wisdom, connected by steps that suggested a path to understanding. On her gown was the Greek letter theta, which often marked prisoners condemned to death, but also represented the deep philosophical knowledge she carried. This woman, Philosophy, saw Boethius's condition and knew he needed help. She banished the shadowy muses, the false gods of poetry and emotion, who had been feeding his sorrow. She sat beside him and spoke a poem that jolted him from his stupor, reminding him of the vast knowledge he had once mastered and the clarity of mind he had lost. Her words were harsh but necessary, a slap in the face that forced him to face his current state. Boethius, now more alert, recognized her as Philosophy, the guide who had been with him since his youth. She dried his tears and promised to help him regain his strength and understanding. She encouraged him to speak openly about his pain and confusion, much like a therapist would today. Boethius, grateful for her presence, began to pour out his heart. He told her about the luxurious life he once led, with a beautiful library where he could pursue his studies and where she would visit to discuss the deepest questions of life. Now he was in a dank, miserable cell, and the stark contrast was almost too much to bear. He blamed Philosophy for his downfall, saying that she had taught him the ideals of a just society, leading him to believe that he could make a difference. He had tried to protect the weak and curb the abuses of the powerful, but instead, he had been betrayed and imprisoned. Boethius's words were filled with anger and resentment, but as he spoke, he began to feel a bit lighter. The act of sharing his pain, of giving voice to his frustrations, was a small step toward healing. Philosophy listened patiently, understanding that his anger was a natural part of his journey. She knew that by allowing him to express his feelings, she was helping him to confront his fears and begin the process of finding a new, more profound understanding of life and its challenges. As the dialogue between Boethius and Philosophy deepens, the conversation takes on a more profound tone. Philosophy, having helped Boethius see that the goods of fortune are fleeting and unreliable, now guides him toward a deeper understanding of what true happiness, or beatitudo, really is. Philosophy begins by explaining that all people, deep down, are searching for happiness. They chase wealth, power, fame, and pleasure, thinking these things will bring them joy. But often, these pursuits only lead to frustration and disappointment. Why? Because they are not the ultimate source of happiness. True happiness, she explains, is something complete and self-sufficient. If happiness needed anything else to be complete, it wouldn't be the highest good. She reminds Boethius that even when he had everything wealth, high office, and a loving family, his mind was still troubled by fears and desires. Wealth, for example, doesn't bring true self-sufficiency. It just creates more worries and needs. Power, too, is a double-edged sword. It brings anxiety and constant challenges. Fame is often just idle gossip, and can be as fleeting as a passing breeze. Physical pleasure, while delightful, is always followed by regret and new cravings. The problem, Philosophy explains, is that we try to break down the highest good into separate parts: self-sufficiency, honor, power, fame, and pleasure, and pursue each one individually. But the highest good is one, indivisible and complete. When we chase after just one of these parts, we miss out on the whole. It's like trying to capture a beautiful sunset by focusing on just one ray of light. You can't grasp the full beauty that way. Philosophy then leads Boethius to a deeper understanding of the nature of the highest good. This good is not something external that can be taken away. It is something that lies within us, a part of our true nature. True happiness comes from within, from understanding and living in harmony with the divine order of the universe. It is a state of mind, a way of being, that is unshaken by the ups and downs of fortune. Boethius, now more at peace, begins to see the world in a new light. He realizes that his suffering, while real, has taught him valuable lessons about the nature of true happiness. He has learned that the things he once thought were essential, his wealth, his status, even his freedom, are not what truly matter. What matters is his inner strength, his integrity, and his connection to the divine. In the end, Boethius finds a kind of joy that is deeper and more enduring than any he has known before. He is no longer a slave to fortune. He is free to live according to his true nature. The wheel of fortune may still turn, but it can no longer control his heart. He has found a home within himself, a place of peace and understanding that no external force can ever take away. Philosophy's words have transformed Boethius. He is no longer a broken man, but a philosopher who has learned to find strength in what remains behind. And in that strength, he finds true happiness.